Your order is in hand, you've logged into the terminal server, you're ready to enter that order, only to discover that Exapta no longer exists. She's been replaced, dethroned. And now, instead of Exapta, you have to learn to use something called AX 2009, the software that has replaced her. To do that, simply double-click on the icon in the lower left-hand corner of your screen, and in the next few minutes, we'll show you how to enter a basic order using Microsoft Dynamics AX 2009. As the software loads, you're probably trying to remember what your password is, or hoping that it didn't expire over the weekend. But in fact, you no longer have to worry about that second password entry, because AX 2009 automatically validates you based on your previous login to the terminal server. She already knows that you're okay. Well, at least most of you are okay. And the first screen that pops up includes the common forms, a list that should look familiar to you if you're familiar with Exapta. You want to enter an order, so of course you go to Sales Order Details and click on it. As soon as you do, a second screen opens up, but of course notice that the first screen is still open behind it, and if you have 17 screens open at once, just pay attention to what you see on the taskbar down below. You can go from one screen to the next by clicking on those items on the taskbar. Now let's look at that actual sales order entry screen. Once again, it should look very familiar to you. Nothing much has changed except for a few critical functions on the right-hand side of the screen. We now have a Create Order button, as well as a Create Line button and an Open Line button. And yes, you could use the previous functionality by clicking on the New button, or hitting Control-N. You could add a new header line and enter certain information there and then go to Header Details. All of that still works. But I'm going to suggest that we try the Create Order button, the new functionality that the boys in the head shed have created for you, because it will allow you to enter everything you need on one screen. And it opens already offering a list of customers for you to choose from, and the order I want to place is for a little shop called Uncle Dick's. And so I right-click in the name column, just as I always did. Then I left-click on Filter by Field. Yes, it's called Filter by Field now, not Find. And when it opens, you'll notice that the name field embeds whatever information was in the original screen. But don't worry about that. Simply type over it. And so I put in Uncle with a star behind it, saying I want anything that begins with Uncle. I click on OK, and sure enough, it brings me back a list that's totally empty. Experienced Exapta user that you are, you realize that probably means that somehow you didn't spell it the way that our database spelled it. I could refresh my list by clicking on this drop-down arrow right here, but I'm going to suggest that you also get acquainted with this button back behind, which looks like a martini glass with an X below it, because that's the Remove Filter button. And if you click on it, it will remove the filter you presently had in place, bringing back the list that you had before. That button's going to be very handy from time to time. All right, so I've misspelled Uncle. I'm going to try it using as few words or as few letters as possible. So we'll try it that way, get rid of the E, put the star there anyway, and click on OK. And sure enough, there's Uncle Dick's. Not once, but twice. And I notice that I've got an order account and an invoice account. I click on the one that is the order account, of course. And that automatically fills in all the information I need at the top, except, of course, for the contact, which for this customer is empty. And then I go down to the Requested Date field, click on the calendar icon, choose a date that's a couple of weeks from today, so we'll go for March 30th. And then I want to ship sooner, so if possible, so I check that box. And yes, I could apply all the various other fields, but this is a very basic order. I'm done. I'm going to click on OK, close that screen down. It brings me back to my original screen, and I don't have to do anything else to that header. It's taken care of. But now I'm ready to add lines to the header itself, and so I'll click on Create Line on the right-hand side of the screen, which opens up yet another screen for me, the Line Entry screen, which has a very different layout than you're used to seeing. in the original Exapta, but lucky for you, it includes instructions on the right-hand side, step by step, as to what you need to enter and where to find it. We realize that these instructions will be of little use to people like John Bell who cannot read, but John's cat does much of his typing for him already. Perhaps he can read for him as well. It's suggesting that I enter the style and steers me towards this field right here. And I could click on the drop-down arrow to find that style, but I know that the cap I want is the 51000, the epic. So I enter that and touch enter. It automatically goes to style color, but if I didn't notice that, I could look over here in my instructions and notice that it says please select the color. So I'll do that. Click on the drop-down arrow, click on cigar. I now have an epic cap in cigar, and the quantity I want will be 24, so I type it right there. And immediately I notice that Queen Axe is giving me inventory information right here and now. That on the 30th of March, the day I want to ship, there will be 4,463 caps available. However, if I needed additional information and had found a problem here, I could click on the View Inventory button below, and that would show me not only that cap, but all the others in that style and color and various sizes as well, if that applied to this particular choice. So I've got my cap, my color, and my quantity. What's next? Well, in fact, my summary screen over here on the right-hand side has crossed off the steps as I've entered them. So step 4 is to continue the Art Overview tab, which of course is right here, or click on the Next tab down below. I do that, and sure enough, it opens up a fresh screen with fresh instructions telling me to click on the Add Art button above to add art to this style. I do that, and a fresh screen opens, offering me the choice to search for the art that I want, but I came prepared. I know that the art I want is 203311. I enter those numbers, I hit enter, and sure enough, it comes up with a screen that shows me the art Bite Me Gecko, a lovely piece of art that reminds me of Bob Allison. Next, look at the instructions on the right, and it says, well, I could modify the art looking at the modification instructions in the lower left-hand corner of my screen, but I don't need to on this particular design. I simply want to choose my art size. So I click on the drop-down arrow, I select cap size, and then click on select size in the lower left-hand corner of that screen. Now I've got my size. What's next? Well, of course, select a location. I click on the drop-down arrow, I select front center. I now have the art, the size of the art, the location of the art. What's next? If I'd forgotten, well, maybe I want art approval, which would take me down here to the lower left-hand corner of the screen. Or maybe I need SO Out approval, also in the same approval options section of the screen. But again, this is a basic order. What's next? I really just need to enter name drops on the next tab. So I click on that tab. It defaults to the name drop entry field. I type in Bob's Stink Bait Shack. Touch enter. And it hasn't seen that name drop before. I add it to the name drop. And then we move on to what? Well, the coloring and materials on the next tab. Clicking on that tab, I click on the drop-down arrow, and I could specify colors, but I'm going to go with best colors for garment on this particular simple order entry. And then what's next? Well, I move on to the next tab or click the yellow button below to save and review the art. And that's really all I need to do here. At which point the screen refreshes, showing me a summary of everything I've entered, the lovely art, its size, its location, the example name drop that used to be there, the actual name drop that I've replaced it with, and of course my coloring guidance. If the art's finished, I can simply return to Style, Pricing, and Special Handling by clicking on the yellow tab below, or I could add another piece of art to it by clicking on this button, but I'm done. I'm going to click on the yellow button. That brings me back to my Style screen, at which point I can now simply save and close, which of course returns me to my original sales order entry screen where I'm ready to add another garment. And that's it for a basic order entry.